Craig, can you hear me? There you go. Hey, can you hear me, Craig?
Hey, I got you.
Everybody say hi to Craig back in our studios. Say hi, Craig. All right, let's see. We'll test Todd's levels. Do I sound okay, Craig?
Yeah, you sound great. Here, let me get a record.
File. Did you get more rain, Craig, today?
No. It's been cloudy. I think it's threatening, but nothing so far.
Okay, I'll count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Sounds good.
All right, Todd, you go ahead and go.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
maybe
9,
a little
10.
hot. Maybe just a little hot. Please bring him down.
1, 2. He says, "Bring me down."
Yeah. What?
1, 2, 3,
That's
4,
pretty good.
5, 6, 7.
Yep.
So, hey, Craig, be mindful that when Mark gets in here, we got to watch him breathing on the mic. He's a big dude.
I don't know what you can do about it, though.
Move it off to the side.
Yeah, but then he drops out, too, so that's...
All right.
All right, Craig, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Pretty good.
All right. Well, they're not here yet, so we'll test once they get here.
Okay, you want me playing him?
Yeah, just keep playing. Yeah, no, we'll do that later.
Okay, go
All
back
right.
to LPR. Okay.
Yep.
So are you with him in Slack?
Yeah.
Okay.
What was I gonna say? I always have this picture of Mike Policeman for some these things.
Here, journalists Mark and Mollie Hemingway, CNN political commentator Scott Jennings, Dr. Carl Truman of Grove City College, President John Russ of Concordia Theological Seminary, President Tom Egger of Concordia Seminary, and Pastor Will Whedon of The Word of the Lord Endures Forever at the 2025 Issues Etc. Making the Case Conference, Friday, July 18th and Saturday, July 19th at Concordia University, Chicago. Learn more at issuesetc.org. Dr. Carl Truman of Grove City College, President John Bruss of Concordia Theological Seminary, President Tom Egger of Concordia Seminary, and Pastor Will Whedon of The Word of the Lord Endures Forever at the 2025 Issues Etc. Making the Case Conference, Friday, July 18th and Saturday, July 19th at Concordia University, Chicago. Learn more at issuesetc.org. So bring her up, please. Go ahead, Mollie.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sibilance.
Popcorn
So
peanut.
here's what we'll do. Let's leave Molly where she's at. Let's bring Todd and Mark down a little bit, okay? And
Bring me and Mark down a little bit.
Go ahead, Todd. Count to 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I think we're pretty good right there. We'll start there.
This is microphone affirmative action.
Yes. So when we're going into breaks, we're going to wait until the bump music gets out and the applause is over, and a spot has started or a liner has started. Before we take off the headphones.
I just lost hearing you.
Yeah. Before we take off the headphones, I'll try and remember because my habit is just to throw them off as soon as my mics. But we're going to leave our mics open. And when the spot starts, we can take them off. Otherwise, it's going to make a bunch of racket.
Got it. I'll just follow your lead.
How are the kids?
Great. We have about
My daughter and son-in-law and 3 grandchildren are living with us in our tiny little house. She decided that they lived in a house. It was a great little house, beautiful little gingerbread house. And she decided that they had a mold problem. They did, but even the mold experts were like, well, that's not my daughter's. So she, in her neuroses, turned this into a major problem and said, we're moving. So they moved in with us.
How you doing, brother?
I don't know. I said, look, all you, because she's like, I want to have more of this and more of that. And I'm like, all you really are going to get is a house without. You're going to get the same house without.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, we're about 4 or 5 weeks away from the oldest leaving. So we're really trying to adjust that.
Okay, so you know the shtick. It's 2 hours of unapologetic, unadulterated fanaticism. It is all audience manipulation for the next 2 hours. So when I go like this, people up there go like this. Bring it down. Now everybody, here we go. Traction 1. Good. All right. Hey, good to have you guys. Any questions? What's that?
So when we fixing the
Yeah, that's right. It's power time.
Yeah, she's ready, so I think it's going to be a little easier, but I'm not looking forward to it.
We only have 2 kids, and the other one is less than 2 years younger than she is, so we're staring down the barrel of moving to the districts here pretty quick.
I will say,
You don't have to be quiet. You know, it's 3 after the hour to allow for terrestrial radio affiliates to break for news. 303 Central.
Thanks for listening to the Best of Issues, Etc. 24/7. We interrupt the current segment to bring you the live broadcast of Issues, Etc. You can hear the interrupted segment again in its entirety at 5 p.m. Central immediately after the live broadcast of Issues, Etc. Again, thanks for listening. Issues, Etc. Live is next.
Hemingway suggested one of these began applause line.
I was going to say, it's the only way I'm going to get any applause. People are told to.
What's that?
Right. Probably good ones. About 2 months.
we have to get out of this trap that people have fallen into, where they identify truth with feeling, and get back to understanding that the best road to truth is faith and reason.
The way people are best manipulated is when they're autonomous. And this is what we have done to women, is told them to be by themselves, to be autonomous, to be in control in their lives, and not to in any way be connected to husbands and children.
You know, it's important to remember, Jesus never says that we need to follow his example and die for our sins, at least on the cross. He's accomplished that. But that doesn't mean that every day there isn't some dying and rising that happens in the shape of our Christian life.
And in all of these letters, he calls us not to be successful or not to be perfect, but he calls us to be faithful, to hold on to his promises.
Lutherans in the hospital in Illinois love Issues Etc.
It is indeed an old Chinese saying, often mistranslated or perhaps misquoted as, "May you live in interesting times." The original from 1627 is, "Better to be a dog in times of tranquility than a human in times of chaos." And we certainly live in times of chaos that often prove very interesting. Greetings and welcome to Issues Etc., coming to you live from the 2025 Issues Etc. Making the Case Conference on the campus of Concordia University, Chicago. I'm Todd Wilkin. Thanks for tuning us in. You can join us with questions or comments as we get a Washington Roundtable with Mark and Mollie Hemingway. Our email address, talkback@issuesetc.org. Our X address @issuesetc. Joining us for a Washington Roundtable, Mark Hemingway. He's senior writer at Real Clear Investigations, books editor for The Federalist. Mark, welcome.
Glad to be here.
And Mollie Hemingway, editor-in-chief of The Federalist. She's a Fox contributor and co-author of the books Justice on Trial and Rigged. Mollie, welcome to you as well.
Thanks.
Mark, what political issues are you and Mollie most divided on?
This is kind of a given day question in a lot of ways. My wife would probably say the answer is foreign policy. My wife has very clear, definite ideas about foreign policy and national interests and things like this. Whereas I don't necessarily think she's more ideological necessarily, but my father was a retired Marine colonel and Vietnam War vet, so I have a very sort of like pragmatic view of it in terms of the cost of war and things like that. I mean, I think my wife would say she's pragmatic about it too. It's just that I think more in terms of, I don't know, the effect on ordinary troops and other things like that, or what I think the military can actually accomplish. Whereas she thinks more in higher terms, like what is our specific national interest in this case.
Does it help or hurt that you used to work for Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard?
Yeah, that's a big part of the problem. Although it's true, like I did work at the Weekly Standard for 8 years, and their animating principle was very much what call neocon foreign policy. Although the word neocon is very loaded and means lots of different things. But I wrote almost exclusively about domestic policy, and to the extent that I did write about foreign policy, it was where it intersected with things like media criticism and other issues like that. So I didn't really delve into that side of things. I will say there were definitely times, like to give you an example, like, and if anyone remembers, what is it, the 2010 bombing of Libya, which was, I think, probably one of America's, undisputed foreign policy disasters of the last, 25, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever you want to say. Basically, Gaddafi had run Libya for the longest time, this strong man who had caused various problems in the region, but he also brought a certain amount of order. And since we bombed Libya and got rid of Gaddafi, on one hand, you don't want to defend Gaddafi. On the other hand, Libya has been a complete failed state and an open-air slave market, and probably the primary conduit of North African immigrants into Europe ever since. I mean, it's just been an unmitigated disaster on like every front since then. And I remember being in an editorial meeting of the Weekly Standard, and Bill Kristol and Steve Hayes, who was also the editor of the Standard at the time, were just like, "Oh, and this is a great idea." And I remember like biting through my lip to the point it was almost bleeding because it just seemed like so obviously like, why would we even do this? But So yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen it from both sides, and at the same time, it's also true that I covered a lot of protests in the early 2000s where you had these radical left-wing groups, Code Pink, protesting America bombing Afghanistan in the wake of 9/11, where it's the complete opposite of what could anyone possibly do to this country that would ever necessitate a military response in their eyes.
So Mollie, what do you think is the issue that divides you most?
So I actually don't think we disagree that much on foreign policy. I think we are in this big area where a lot of Americans are, which is believing that we should have a strong military, but we should be thoughtful about when we use it and how we use it and what our aims are. But I was going to say death penalty.
Oh,
because
I didn't think about that.
I do believe the state has the right to enact the death penalty, and Mark has concerns about it more in practice, I think, than isn't your issue more with application?
I think in theory there are plenty of times where the death penalty would be applicable. It's just that there's a whole lot of injustice that has been associated with the death penalty in recent decades that, was, DNA analysis and other things like that make me concerned that there are lots of incentives in the court system to railroad people. And it's one of those punishments you can't take back.
So you guys just came in from basically the Beltway this morning. How would you describe the atmosphere over the last week and a half in Washington, D.C., Mollie?
I just first off want to talk about the physical atmosphere. It feels so nice and cool here in Chicago that we're just walking around enjoying our day. It has been weeks upon weeks of blistering heat. You're not asking about that kind of atmosphere, though.
Well,
no.
As they like to say, it's not the heat, it's the humidity. I mean, it's been really, really muggy.
So, how would you describe the political atmosphere in D.C.? We've had, I mentioned living in interesting times or times of chaos, unprecedented events unfolding in the last 24 hours that people like me thought I've been promised my whole life, but it would never happen. The defunding of PBS. Stephen Colbert apparently is no longer a thing, and that's on top of wall-to-wall concern about conspiracy theories and Trump's base and all of those things. How would you describe it?
That's a lot of different stuff.
Yes, it is. It's all happening at the same time.
I mean, I kind of feel like we could
go through them
down
one by one,
each of them. But what's interesting is the rescissions package, which is how NPR and PBS were defunded finally after literally 40 years of Republicans claiming they were going to do it. That worked its way through Congress in a pretty easy fashion. It wasn't major drama. There is an appetite for cutting some funding or pretending to cut serious funds that made it possible. And Mark and I were talking on the way out here how weird it is that NPR didn't even try to prevent this from happening. They are so crazy far left that nobody was really defending the quality of their product in terms of it receiving government funding. And we were talking why didn't they throw a bone at Republicans or fire their crazy far left pro-censorship leader of the organization, or bring on some people who could articulate conservative thought once a week. They just didn't even try to save their funding, it seemed like.
When Ken Burns was asked about NPR's funding and whether or not they were balanced, Ken Burns said, well, this was the home of William F. Buckley, his program Firing Line, and it's Firing Line hasn't been on PBS in 40 years? I mean, that's how out of touch these people are. I mean, they just don't. And there was a story recently where something there was 87 editorial personnel at National Public Radio, and every single one of them was a registered Democrat. Not one.
I was listening since it's Friday. They have a news roundup for 2 hours, domestic for the first hour, foreign the second hour. And while they began with the panel of journalists on National Public Radio on the rescission package, they spent about 4.5 minutes on that, and then they went straight to Epstein for the next 25 minutes until I had to turn it off because I had to leave the hotel room. They were still talking about the Epstein story. How big of a story is that in D.C., and how big of a story do you think it should be?
It is massive in D.C., and it's interesting because so for many years, I used to get emails from people talking about Epstein, and they'd say, there's this guy, and he's trafficking children, and nobody's talking about it. And when you're a journalist, you get so many emails from people like this, and 99% of them are just written by people who are in prison, or, they're people who have mental health issues that lead them into conspiratorial thinking. And so I just actually have a folder in my email for these types of things in case something turns out where I need to search through it. But for years I just thought, what are people focused on here? And when it turned out that it was true, I just tried to remind myself to pay better attention when people are saying things that can seem outlandish. And yet, it has been one of these issues where sometimes the left really gloms onto it and sometimes the right. I understand why the right is more concerned about it. To me, it's a proxy for all these issues that powerful people can get away with, sometimes like literally murder, and if they have enough money for proper legal representation, and it keeps them from being able to be held accountable. There's a lot of weirdness about how much money he made, where he made his money, this island, how many powerful people he was close to. And so it has, also a lot of people were saying that if Republicans came to power again, they would reveal all. And, there's so much to talk about this too. And I get that, and then I also, because I do a lot of government reporting, don't know if people understand the lack of realism with what they want to achieve and what can be achieved. So first off, any file you're hoping to get from the government, by definition, was acquired by the government as part of an investigation. That leads to all sorts of restrictions on what can be shared if there's ongoing legal issues in play. But also, a file is only so good as the investigation itself. So you take something like the Robert Mueller investigation into whether Donald Trump was a spy for Russia for his lifetime. All they were looking at was for evidence of that. And anybody could make any claim and it would go in the file. The claims never bore out, but the claims were in there. Likewise, none of the most salacious aspects of this Epstein story have really been litigated or investigated to fruition, except for the part where Ghislaine Maxwell, the person who worked with Epstein, was sentenced to 20 years for her role in procuring and trafficking young girls for Epstein. So I definitely agree that more needs to come out about everything, the investigations at the local, state, and federal level. Ghislaine Maxwell is appealing her 20-year conviction, which restricts what can be shared as part of the due process that she gets in her appeal. And it's just a mess. It's kind of like all the people who were involved with it are now having all of their failures, whether it's failures of investigation or prosecution, coming to bear.
A big part of the attention being focused on this issue right now, as in the last few weeks, is entirely disingenuous, and that needs to be said. Like, what happened here is that the Trump administration completely overpromised and underachieved, sorry, in terms of what they were going to deliver on the Epstein stuff, right? And this angered their base. The Democrat Party and Democratic, the liberal wing of the media, which is to say the media, all immediately seized on this rift and Trump is vulnerable on this, and all just flooded the zone. They didn't care about any of this. In the Biden administration. The Biden administration could have declassified everything. They could have done whatever they want. There was zero pressure on them to do it. Frankly, there's this, attempt we've seen lately to try and make this about Trump and other things, when the reality is the reason why Democrats weren't making a big deal out of it was because they stood a lot to lose. I mean, two of the biggest people implicated in the story are Bill Clinton and Reid Hoffman, who is one of the billionaire founder of LinkedIn, who's one of their biggest fundraisers, who, by the way, is the guy that personally funded all of the lawsuits against Donald Trump that were going on leading up to the election. Reid Hoffman has personally been on Epstein's island. I don't see this as them, they finally feel safe that they can talk about Epstein in a way that they think will be more damaging to Trump than them, and that's really what's explaining all of the attention in the last few weeks.
Mark Hemingway of Real Clear Investigations is our guest, along with Mollie Hemingway, Chief Editor-in-Chief of The Federalist. We're getting a Washington roundtable from the Issues Etc. Making the Case conference at Concordia University, Chicago. We'll be right back.
Here's an easy way for you to help us contend for truth in an age of anti-truth. Subscribe to the Issues Etc. podcast with YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Just type Issues Etc. in the YouTube search engine and click subscribe. For Apple and Spotify, type Issues Etc. in the search engine, hit follow, and leave us a 5-star review. Help us inform other podcast listeners by subscribing to the Issues Etc. podcast with YouTube, Spotify, and Apple.
In his June-July letter in the Lutheran Witness, President Harrison writes, "We can rejoice even when we suffer because suffering helps us. It helps us learn to endure." President Harrison was writing to the thousands of youth at the youth gathering who will be receiving a copy of the June-July issue, Christian Endurance, the youth gathering issue, in which it will help expand on what they are learning at the youth gathering. To get your copy, visit cph.org/witness or visit witness.lcms.org. Lutheran Witness, helping you interpret the world from a Lutheran perspective.
We love our on-demand listeners. You're listening to Issues Etc.
Memoria Press equips students with a classical Christian education. They publish mastery-based curriculum for kindergarten through high school. Their aim is to cultivate wisdom and virtue in their students through the great books and the liberal arts. To learn more, visit memoriapress.com. Use the coupon code LPR25 to save $5 at checkout. Memoria Press, saving Western civilization one student at a time. memoriapress.com.
Now hiring. Concordia University Chicago is seeking a passionate and experienced leader to serve as director of the Early Childhood Center on our beautiful River Forest campus. If you have a heart for early childhood education and a desire to lead in a Christ-centered environment, we invite you to apply today. To learn more and apply, visit cuchicago.edu/aboutus/employment. That's cuchicago.edu/aboutus/employment.
Welcome back to Issues Etc. I'm Todd Wilkin on this Friday, July the 18th. We are broadcasting live from the Issues Etc. Making the Case conference at Concordia University, Chicago with Mark and Mollie Hemingway for a Washington roundtable. Mollie, I'm going to stay with Epstein just for a few more minutes. How do you explain what I consider to be, and it's simply my opinion, but I think it's shared by a lot of people, the comms disaster that the White House has stepped in or created over this story lately? I think anyone who thinks this is 4D chess now is probably, it's wishful thinking.
Oh, there's so much here too. I don't know if I can explain it, but I totally agree that it's been a disaster. The first level of disaster happened actually at the Department of Justice. That's because Pam Bondi claimed that she was asked a question about this alleged list of clients that Epstein had. And her response made people think that she was saying there was a list, it was on her desk, and it would be released. So that was why people were like, oh, well, if the Attorney General of the United States is saying this, it must be true. It's not just a crazy conspiracy theory. Then the Department of Justice released a binder of information that had already been released to people, not journalists, but like internet influencer types, and made a big production about how they were releasing the Epstein files, but it was already information that had been released. So people at that point started wondering just like, what is going on? This is very weird behavior. Now, many voters on both left and right have been caring about Epstein for a long time. President Trump is not someone who's talked a lot about it, and in fact, he seems to be kind of annoyed by the topic and has been for a long time. So he broke one of the cardinal rules of public relations, which is that, a story dies if you don't feed it, but he just kept feeding it every day by getting angry at people for talking about it, which just made people want to talk about it all the more. And then something happened last night, actually, that might have helped him out a great deal, which is the Wall Street Journal published a story that kind of vindicated, so Trump had been saying, oh, these files, they were put together by Comey, which is actually true, not just James Comey overseeing the FBI, but James Comey's daughter, Maureen, was the lead prosecutor of Epstein and Ghislaine, Ghislaine Maxwell, also Epstein?
I think Ghislaine.
I don't remember if she was before he killed himself, I guess that's controversial to say. So literally, like, the Comey family was deeply involved in this. And also he knows from the Russia collusion investigation that investigations can be tools of bad operatives in government to just create narratives that aren't true. So he's trying to push that idea. And then the Wall Street Journal steps in and helps him out with that narrative that he's trying to push, that this is all just something that we shouldn't mess with. Because last night they say they had seen a book of birthday letters to Jeffrey Epstein. And one of them came from Donald Trump. And so they quote from it, and they say it was bawdy, and it included a picture, like a line drawing that Donald Trump had done of a lady. And the wording of Donald Trump, allegedly in this birthday note, it just didn't sound like him at all. It was poetic, like it was kind of poetic and literate in a way that you don't associate with Donald Trump. It just plainly didn't sound like him, and it was also in a format that he'd never done before. We have seen millions of texts, notes, tweets, posts, and words from this person, and it just didn't sound like him. And so Donald Trump saying, like, this isn't even real stuff, and then the Wall Street Journal comes out with a story that just doesn't sound the most real. Also, he told them it was not him, and they ran it anyway, so it's just, I don't know. It's a mess. It's going to be ongoing, but I think that story kind of helped Trump.
So just setting aside the particulars of the Epstein thing for a second, the reason why the Epstein thing looms so large is this much broader issue we have that affects a lot of different things, which is that we have a huge problem with government transparency in this country. And like, one of the things that sort of amazed me, as this Epstein thing was blowing up in the past couple of weeks, like, simultaneously they were putting out information that, oh, by the way, the CIA was in contact with Lee Harvey Oswald, before, JFK got shot, and whoops, sorry, maybe we should have said something about this before, even though we were, messing with congressional committees decades later to keep this information from coming out. And I'm like, how? Like, how is this possible? Like, the government has been doing everything they can for a very long time to undermine trust of the American people. In 1963, maybe you could make a case that it is a really bad thing for the body politic to lose faith in the CIA and their government by announcing that the CIA was in contact with John F. Kennedy's assassination. In 2025, we've seen so many things now that you can't make that argument. We're rapidly losing faith in our institutions and our governing bodies, and we need more transparency, not just on Epstein, but a million other things. 1 year ago, we were at this conference when Donald Trump was shot. I still know nothing about the man that shot Donald Trump. I can tell you that, 100 years ago, a man named Charles Guiteau shot a president. I don't even remember this guy's name, and it was a year ago. Like, it is astonishing to me how little information we are being given on so many different things, whether it's Epstein, whether it's Trump's assassination, whether it is that crazy, Las Vegas mass shooting a few years ago. There are so many things that keep happening where we're just supposed to swallow that, oh, I guess this is just this weird thing that happened, and we need to know more. We need to demand more of our law enforcement and our security apparatuses and our government in general in terms of, we need to trust these people, and when people have good reason not to trust them at the moment.
So Wayne in Bristol, Connecticut has a question. He says, Elon Musk brought up the possibility of creating a third party. He went so far as to get a website. I don't think he's filed any papers. The American Party. Do you think that this could be viable, seeing that neither the Republicans or Democrats appear to be serious with tackling government waste and the growing national deficit? Mollie?
Oh, I unfortunately don't think third parties are terribly effective. But if I were Elon and I had his money and I wanted to have more political sway for my ideas, which I think in his case are about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse from our government budget, I would operate more as a caucus that could be brought to sway in each party. It's quite difficult to build up a powerful party. It involves weird coalitions. I mean, you see this in the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. They are weird coalitions of people. It takes a lot to get on the ballot in every state, to have the kind of infrastructure. And I don't think Elon even has thought about that type of coalition. But like, if it would have been cool, if I were him, to have spent my money trying to advocate for more rescissions in this recent rescission package, or to push pressure on members of Congress to do their jobs better when it comes to budgeting in general. And that's something that he might lean into instead.
I saw some polling data this morning that I think that I don't quote me on this, but I think it was like something that Elon Musk was like 57 points underwater in approval. Mm-hmm. What happened was, obviously Elon became, explicitly partisan and endorsed Trump in a very big way and spent a lot of money getting him elected. So immediately alienated all, Democrats in this country to the point where people were firebombing Tesla dealerships not that long ago. And then he comes around and he starts attacking Trump. So then he's alienated Trump supporters or whatever. And I don't quite understand where his base of popular support, which is what you need to start a party, not just money, is going to come from. Having said that, he's got plenty of money, and Mollie's right. If he wanted to focus around the margins, like primary Republicans he doesn't like, or support primary challenges against Republicans he doesn't like, or state ballot measures, or put in a big, a big amount of money to try and get a national constitutional convention, with 30 some states, however many states it is you need to do it. There's a lot of things that you could try that would be, I think, far more effective than trying to be, a less popular version of Ross Perot.
Governor Ron DeSantis suggested that he use his resources and his influence to try and do that last thing you just mentioned and get a balanced budget amendment passed. It's going to take a lot of money and a lot of media, but he said, why don't you do that? That could achieve a lot of your goals. What are your thoughts there, Mark?
That would be amazing, and I think it's a good idea, and I think that people need to start thinking more in terms of not necessarily doing things to undermine the Constitution, but thinking more about using the Constitution to do bigger structural reforms. I don't think it's as impossible as people want to say it is, although it's certainly made difficult in a more polarized environment. Given the way that state governments have been trending, I could easily see a possibility where you get, 66% of 34, 34 states or whatever you need to hold a constitutional convention. I mean, I'd love to see someone try.
Your thoughts, Mollie?
I don't mean morally, because obviously Elon Musk is deeply immoral.
Is this going to be the issue we disagree on today?
He intentionally creates children without having relationship with their mothers. There are all these problems. So I don't mean it morally, but I think he's a great man. Like, he's doing great things that history will know this person for a long time. Mostly, I mean, the rarity of creating a single company that has, more than $1 billion in revenue is very rare, and he's done it so many times. He's really talented in ways, and he thinks things very differently. And I even think that he played a big role in the last election politically, more than anything, by purchasing Twitter. I don't know if people realize how dire the censorship situation was prior to him purchasing Twitter. It was impossible to have news and information that contradicted the official government narrative from having any sway with the American people, because the censorship complex was shutting everything down until he bought that. And that alone is why the election went the way it did. He also helped out with actual election administration in certain places. But I don't think he's very good at politics. And so I just think he should focus on different areas, and then also focus on not leaving his children fatherless or motherless, as the case may be.
Mollie Hemingway is our guest, along with her husband, Mark Hemingway. We're getting a Washington Roundtable on this Friday afternoon, broadcasting live from the Issues Etc. Making the Case conference at Concordia University, Chicago. We'll turn to foreign policy next.
I I understood that the faith that we hold here reaches back 2,000 years and counting, considering the Old Covenant.
Grammy-nominated Christian rapper Flame talking about his new book, Because Jesus Taught It, Christianity Through the Eyes of the Church Fathers.
My goodness, it helped me understand that God is for us in ways that I wasn't exposed to, thinking about the sacrament. It just brought a whole new comfort and joy.
You can purchase the Issues Etc. Book of the Month for July, Because Jesus Taught It, at issuesetc.org.
Go. What if your investment can build more than your future? At Lutheran Church Extension Fund, your dollars work for you and for LCMS Ministries. With a variety of term notes and the flexible all-access account, you can invest with confidence, knowing your money is making a difference. Learn more, including disclosures and terms, at lcef.org/solutions. LCEF, Financial Solutions, together in faith.
Thank you.
Confessional Lutherans are invited to rent a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom Table Rock lakefront home in the Ozarks. Table Rock Lake is a premier lake in the heart of the Ozarks for boating, water sports, and fishing. This log cabin-style rental sleeps 12 and is 30 minutes from Branson and 20 minutes from Silver Dollar City. Learn more by calling Swanson Estates 713-855-2681. Be sure to mention Issues Etc. 713-855-2681.
Holy Cross Lutheran Church, Moline, Illinois, invites you to join us in receiving the Lord's gifts in word and sacrament. Sunday services are at 8:15 and 10:45 a.m., with Bible class and Sunday school at 9:30 a.m. We are located in the Quad Cities at 4107 21st Avenue, Moline, Illinois. Welcome in the name of our Lord.
Lutheranism in the public square. You're listening to Issues Etc.
Thanks to the following congregations for standing with us by becoming an Issues Etc. congregational sponsor: Advent Lutheran, Zionsville, Indiana; Holy Shepherd Lutheran, Haslett, Texas; Holy Trinity Lutheran, Columbia, South Carolina; Our Redeemer Lutheran, Emmett, Idaho; St. Paul Lutheran, International Falls, Minnesota; Our Redeemer Lutheran, Fayetteville, North Carolina; Redeemer Lutheran, Lincoln, Nebraska; St. Peter Lutheran, Arlington, Wisconsin; Trinity Lutheran, Okmulgee, Oklahoma; and Zion Lutheran, Pleasant Plains, Illinois. Find out how your confessional Lutheran church can support this worldwide outreach by including Issues Etc. in your mission or advertising budget. Just go to issuesetc.org, click Support Donate, and print a one-page flyer. When your congregation becomes an Issues Etc. sponsor, we'll publicize your church on the podcast, at our website, and in the Issues Etc. journal.
There we go. Let's go.
The Issues Etc. Book of the Month for July is called Because Jesus Taught It, Christianity Through the Eyes of the Church Fathers. It's written by Christian artist Flame. He's a lay theologian, and he takes us through both baptism and the Lord's Supper from the Church Fathers. Find out more about this book at our website, issuesetc.org, or call Concordia Publishing House, 1-800-325-3040. Because Jesus Taught It, Christianity Through the Eyes of the Church Fathers. We're getting a Washington Roundtable with Mark and Mollie Hemingway from the Issues Etc. Making the Case Conference at Concordia University, Chicago. Mollie, turning to foreign policy, Mark has a question. He says, please forgive me if I'm wrong, but you seem to be consistently anti-Ukraine. Ukraine is a freedom-loving Christian country, including Lutherans. Ukraine was recently invaded by its aggressive neighbor. Ukraine is by no means perfect. It is highly centralized, not without corruption, but a strong ally. When history books write that Russia unilaterally invaded, bombed schools, hospitals, railway stations, resulting in a status quo even worse than Yalta was, what do we tell our kids? What will it mean for our nation and our allies?
Okay, there's a lot there. First off, it is not true that I oppose Ukraine. I support Ukraine in its war from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But I think the question about history is a good way to approach this, thinking through from a bigger historical perspective. I do disagree with how the United States approached Ukraine, the issue of Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia and the NATO countries for the last few decades. So if you go back to the dissolution of the Soviet Union, I don't think people realize how close to a disaster that could have been. You had a bunch of countries with nuclear weapons, you had a lack of stability, people who had for 70 years been under communism and had not, it took like some work to get everybody into being a functioning country again. You had to divvy up the Soviet Union and make sure on the borders that everything was working. And everything worked really well. And I think the George H.W. Bush administration does not get enough credit for how well they handled that, because they were kind of the ones administering that period of time. And they said the one thing they were nervous about was Ukraine, because it could, if it kept being used by the West as a way to sort of poke the bear, they could see that it could lead to Russia invading. And so the way that, from that period of time, from the George H.W. Bush administration, things just got on a path that was not very healthy, and where a lot of people were saying, we're worried this could lead to conflict. That does not justify Russia invading Ukraine, but it means that it was not a complete surprise for a lot of foreign policy watchers. And for Russia, there are some existential issues in play related to their ability to access water ports on that side of the country. And they felt, not without reason, that the West, and the US in particular, were using Ukraine as an area to really constrain Russia. And so I wish that we'd handled things differently for the last few decades. But having not done that, then that does not mean that Russia is justified. The other issue, though, is that it's emblematic of how the US in recent years has moved away from trying to win military conflicts into finding military conflicts that enable the spending of a lot of money without any resolution. And it's kind of obvious, but once you realize it, that we went from using our military to win a conflict and then leave, and then it moved into using our military to create these areas where we just exist for decades and spend a lot of money existing there without achieving the aims we want to achieve. It's kind of hard not to see it. And so the issue with Russia that you wish might not be true, but is true, is they have 6,000 nuclear warheads. They don't have to accept a conventional defeat. And in order to defeat them, are you willing to truly go to that level? Like, are you willing to go to nuclear war? And if not, should you be trying to negotiate the best possible settlement for the people of Ukraine? And I just want to, the guy said something about Ukraine being, what was it? Freedom-loving?
Freedom-loving, mostly Christian, including Lutheran.
Yeah, so both Russia and Ukraine do have Lutherans. I don't know if people realize that, Russia does not have a great deal of religious liberty, but I think there are like 7 churches that are allowed to exist, and Lutherans are one of them, dating back to Catherine the Great era. And Ukraine also has some Lutherans, and I would say neither Russia nor Ukraine are particularly freedom-loving.
They exist, but they don't have religious freedom in the sense that we have religious freedom.
Ukraine's better in many senses than Russia, but it's a pretty complicated situation. But also right now, Ukraine does not have elections. They haven't had elections in years. They don't have freedom of the press. They don't have freedom of religion, if you're Russian Orthodox in particular. Which is all kind of understandable. In times of war, you frequently limit people's rights and to practice things like that. But it's just not quite the situation is much more complicated than I think we get from a lot of our media. And also, again, nobody is like even trying to come up with a plan for how to have this not result in just many, many, many more hundreds of thousands of people dead.
Mark, did President Trump overestimate his salesmanship when it comes to Vladimir Putin and, as he said, ending the war on day one?
In a day.
Well, yeah, when you phrase it like that, obviously, yes, to some extent. I do think that part of the problem, however, has been this war could have been nipped in the bud fairly quickly. Unfortunately, I think that Western countries manipulated Ukraine to a certain extent. Like they thought, well, if we just spend $100 billion arming Ukraine for a year, we'll destroy half of Russia's military, and then we can, do the negotiated settlement or whatever later, rather than nipping the war in the bud. This war is going to end in a settled agreement, sort of, one way or the other. It's just sort of, looking at a map and the historical factors and everything else. I mean, it's just a question of how many people are going to die in the meantime, and it's really gotten, I think, out of control. I really feel like the United States and the UK and various NATO allies thought that we could sort of contain this, And not only that, there's this problem with Russia we have where I don't think that people see things clearly or pragmatically as far as Russia is concerned. Basically, since Donald Trump's election, we have this friend, David Reboy, who's been saying for a while now that Democrats in America don't have foreign enemies. They have domestic enemies they project onto foreigners. And so this is the whole thing with Russia. Like, nobody can see anything clearly. Russia is the guy that elected Donald Trump. Never mind, there's no proof that Russia had anything to do with Donald Trump's election in 2016. And after all, we've seen Russiagate and all that unraveling. Like, it looks even worse. But the fact of the matter is they created this boogeyman out of Russia, and that is really impacting, I think, the West's ability to look at Vladimir Putin and see somebody, who is admittedly an evil guy. I mean, I don't think he's a good guy, but the reality of foreign policy is making deals with a lot of very bad guys to get the best outcome. And right now you're looking at a complete and total meat grinder. I mean, I don't think people realize, there have been well over 1 million casualties in this war now. Over 1 million in the 21st century. I mean, that's absolutely insane. I mean, I think we had like 3,000 U.S. casualties in, Iraq in 12 years or something like that in America, and that was like horribly unacceptable to our domestic politics. 1 million people dying in a European war in 2025. It's crazy.
So, Mollie, how do you explain? This has puzzled me since the beginning of the Ukraine-Russia war, that the almost instantaneous cause célèbre that this thing became politically, where Ukrainian flags, I would love to have foreseen this so that I could have invested in Ukrainian flags, because they popped up everywhere. We still have, I live in a very red county, but we still have a few of these kooks who are flying the Ukrainian flag in front of their house. How did that happen, that suddenly a country that most Americans couldn't even find on a map became this? Was it a proxy for Donald Trump opposition? What was it?
So I don't know, but okay, there's a lot there too. The Ukraine had kind of been a staging ground for a lot of foreign money and organizations, and so in Washington, D.C., where we live, a lot of people actually kind of work in the Ukraine ecosphere. I don't know how to, there are a lot of organizations that are based out of there. There's a lot of money flowing in there. Even the Russia collusion hoax originally began in Ukraine, and it was a dispute over foreign policy, whether we should have this posture with Russia that we had or not. That's how the whole Russia thing started. But it was actually Ukraine. Paul Manafort, who was managing Donald Trump's campaign, had some ties to one of the political parties in Ukraine. The Fusion GPS people had ties to the other parties that were in
Joe Biden's son was getting paid by the Ukrainians.
We have had, I forgot that. He worked for Burisma, which was kind of a Ukrainian
energy
government, affiliated energy concern. We had been involved in the unseating of one of their democratically elected governments during the Obama administration. So it's just going back a long time. But I think the reason why a lot of people got whipped up into it was also, yes, the media, and every single media company kind of loves war. They love the ratings that come with it. They're very supportive of any type of entrance into war, and they get hungry for like a new war. And in some left-wing media supported it because they thought it showed Biden being strong. Usually wars help a president politically, particularly at the front end. And I mean, at the front end, everybody said that they supported Ukraine against Russia's invasion. The numbers have declined precipitously since the beginning. But then it's really almost all media companies just love war. And so I think that carries down to the people too.
I want to be clear here. I mean, Russia was the aggressor. Russia is, run by a bad leader, and what they did in Ukraine is awful. And we need to stand foursquare against that. But at the same time, we really do have to weigh that against pragmatic concerns. Again, 1 million people, dying or injured in a war. From a practical perspective, we need to be looking at ending that as soon as possible and ending the bloodshed. And yes, and hopefully doing it in a way that doesn't reward Putin. But if Ukraine's not that big a country, they don't have that many single men. Well, they don't have that many single men to mount, this kind of war. It's not China or India or something like that. I mean, like the future of that country depends on, not having everybody, of childbearing age dying in war.
Well, and to make matters worse, Russia has a long history of just throwing bodies at war. They win wars by just sacrificing people. I mean, you look at what they did in World War II, it's just unbelievable how many tens of millions of men died because they're basically using bodies as bombs. I mean, they just don't have...
In World War II, Russia literally pushed people out of planes without parachutes. I mean, that is their attitude toward war culturally. It is frightening.
Mark Hemingway is our guest, along with Mollie Hemingway. We're getting Washington Roundtable. We will turn to Israel and Iran next.
Do the spiritual paths presented by the world's various religions all lead to the same God? I've written a column titled Pope Francis and the Creed of Universalism for the latest Issues Etc. journal. We'll send it to you for free. Just click the red journal subscription button in the right-hand column at issuesetc.org. In the Wittenberg Trail feature, Seminary of Will Welch writes about his path from liberal Lutheranism to confessional Lutheranism. The free online Issues Etc. journal.
Psalm 20 reads, "May we shout for joy over your victory and lift up our banners in the name of our God." Ad Crucem's church banners are beautiful and meaningful and enhance the sanctuary. Come on over to Ad Crucem and see our excellent selection. For example, the new Easter and Advent banners in the stained glass style, or our multi-season banners in different liturgical colors. Visit adcrucem.com. That's ADCRUCEM.com.
Education and edification. You're listening to Issues Etc.
This is Pastor Matthew Harrison, president of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. The LCMS operates the second largest parochial school system in the United States. What can you expect from a Lutheran Church Missouri Synod school? There's one race, the human race. And Jesus died for the sins of every man, woman, and child from every land and every nation. Life begins at conception. All life is precious from womb to tomb. And every student, parent, and teacher is created in the very image of God. There's right and wrong, and we know which is which from the Ten Commandments. There are only two sexes, male and female. He created them. Marriage is the lifelong union of one man and one woman. There's such a thing as objective, absolute truth, and it's found in the person, work of Jesus Christ, His Word. To find a Lutheran Church Missouri Synod school near you, visit lcms.org/schools.
Welcome back to Issues Etc. I'm Todd Wilkin. Mark Hemingway is our guest, senior writer for Real Clear Investigations and books editor at The Federalist. Mollie Hemingway is also with us. She's editor-in-chief at The Federalist, Fox News contributor, and co-author of the books Justice on Trial and Rigged. Let's turn to Israel and Iran. Originally, it was Israel and Hamas, and simply that little strip of land called Gaza. And I think it's safe to say that it has escalated to a more regional conflict, but pointed in particular not only at Iran but also its proxies. If you had to give someone the kind of the thumbnail sketch of this conflict at this point, Mark, how would you describe the situation so that they can understand what's really going on here? Because on this side of, over here in the United States, it's all about issues of anti-Semitism or Zionism or blind opposition either to or against Israel.
Well, I didn't realize we were going to be here for 6 hours. It is really interesting to me, like you just, asked that question about how did it become, such an immediate, cause in the West, Ukraine. How did everybody just sort of, flip a switch and come on? I asked that sort of same question about how, in the wake of October 7th, all of a sudden there was this tremendous sympathy for Hamas and what the atrocities that they committed. I don't really know what exactly is going on there, except to say that, again, this is a conflict that is being very much muddied by Western ideology in the sense that there's been this, big project for, 50 plus years in American universities and Western universities generally to uplift the Palestinian cause, which, there are Christians in Palestine, and if you go back far enough in time, I mean, there are definitely reasons to be sympathetic to the Palestinians. The problem is that as time has passed, you've had enough governments in the Palestinian territories like Hamas that have done things like October 7th or, the, Yasser Arafat and the PLO, the terrorist acts committed at the Olympics in 1972, hijacking of planes and on and on and on. There's so many things where it's like, at what point does the moral legitimacy of the Palestinian cause get erased by the, horrifically, violent legacy of these leaders that they keep propping up and in the case of Hamas, literally electing. And so it's a real sort of, catch-22 in terms of, on one hand, being sympathetic to these people that are really stuck in these very small areas and very much constrained by the surrounding Israeli government. But at the same time, it's like, well, they're constrained for a reason because they have acted in extraordinarily violent and atrocious ways. Now, how Iran gets into that picture, of course, is that Iran is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism on the planet. They supported Hezbollah in Lebanon, which borders Israel from the north, and has been responsible for all kinds of attacks on Israel that way. A big sort of interesting part of the Palestinian problem is that even though there's all these surrounding, in theory, friendly Muslim countries, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon to some extent, that could take in the Palestinians, they want nothing to do with them, and so they are sort of the worst of both worlds. They're keeping the Palestinians confined in this area, but at the same time causing agitation against Israel because of the historic sort of anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish sentiment among Muslims in the Middle East. And it's really just sort of a giant mess. Now, it is very interesting how Israel has been not just, you would expect them to be successful against a tiny area like Gaza in their own country, militarily, which they have been, although I would point out that they haven't secured their objective of getting all the hostages released. For all the devastation in Gaza, I don't know whether or not I want to necessarily defend that entirely, but it's also true that Hamas could have obviated or stopped a lot of that immediately by releasing the hostages, and they refused to do it. And at some point, the civilian population is responsible for, the political leadership, doing violent things in their behalf. But it is interesting that Israel has been so, at least to my way of thinking, at least very strategically smart about using this Gaza conflict to seize the opportunity to take away Iran's nuclear program, which is an existential threat to Israel. I think there's no question that if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, there's a significant chance that it gets used on Israel. So it's a lot to unpack, but it is certainly interesting how, on one hand, from every conceivable military and strategic vantage point, Israel is just dominating in a way that's just been unbelievable. Some of the things they've achieved in this war with like that pager operation, or this attack on Iran, are just remarkable military accomplishments for a country that size. At the same time, they're losing the PR battle in about 100 different ways, and it's really, really interesting that there's a dichotomy of that military strategic success and their broader political failures.
Mollie, with about 90 seconds, what do you make of how this is playing here in the United States?
I think well, if you look at the polls, the vast majority of Americans retain their support for Israel as an ally. It's obviously true that our colleges have a different thing going on. One thing I wish people would remember, like when BLM started in 2020, I went to their webpage, and one of their very first things they said that they existed for, the Black Lives Matter movement, was the liberation of Palestine. And in this country, corporations gave $100 billion, that can't be, 100 million. It has to be million, right?
Probably more than
some
that.
Insane amount. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know. Like if it's more than $5, I start losing track here. To the BLM movement and its associated causes. And then later, when we had all these encampments on school campuses, people were like, well, where did this come from? It's like, well, we did have corporations giving all of their money to support this cause, and under the guise of BLM. And so I think we have a big problem of having educated people to this type of Marxist way of thinking, where you have certain people who are privileged and certain people who are not, and they didn't think through the ramifications, and so now some of their favorite groups are being attacked.
So some of the most privileged children in America whining about not being, or maybe just, what would you call it, virtue signaling about their support for the downtrodden. About 30 seconds.
Well, but again, the point about how after October 7th, which was this horrible situation where 1,200 Israelis were brutally killed, they attacked the music festival where some of the most left-wing Israelis were, and horrific slaughter of people. The fact that people didn't immediately respond to that with horror, but instead you had people breaking out in this country, support for Hamas at that moment in time was a very bad sign. And you heard the phrase globalize the intifada, which is about targeting Jews and supporters of Israel wherever they are in the world, and we're seeing that.
Mollie Hemingway is our guest, along with Mark Hemingway. We're getting a Washington Roundtable. I'm Todd Wilkin. We're broadcasting live from the Issues at Center are Making the Case conference at Concordia University in Chicago. More of the Roundtable after this.
Others talk. We have something to say. You're listening to Issues, Etc.
I think the reason I ask it is because our political lens is especially immediately takes everything and forces it through the sieve of basically critical theory, or forces it through the sieve of how is this going to hurt or help Donald Trump. And then the reaction is gauged entirely upon how is this going. And there's no digestion of what's actually happening or how we got to this point. Yeah. What I actually worry about is that I don't think Israel realizes that the whole way of getting to then perpetrate it on a different set of people.
I don't think that's fair.
No, I don't think it's a fair comparison either. But that's where,
like where
that's
people
where they're
are.
at.
Yeah.
10 seconds.
Okay, what's our next?
Oh, that's a good question. We'll mix it up. I'm going to ask the Concordia University's Learning Something from Hillsdale College too. Welcome back to Issues Etc. I'm Todd Wilken. We're broadcasting from the 2025 Issues Etc. Making the Case Conference at Concordia University, Chicago on this Friday afternoon. Mark Hemingway is our guest, senior writer at Real Clear Investigations and books editor at The Federalist. Mollie Hemingway is also with us, editor-in-chief of The Federalist, a Fox News contributor and co-author of the books Justice on Trial and Rigged. Mollie, David in Michigan has a kind of non-political question because of, I think both of you have an association with Hillsdale College, a very storied university in the United States that famously does not take federal money. What can our Concordia universities learn from the Hillsdale College experience?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. And I do teach at Hillsdale. We have a DC campus, and I teach undergrads at the DC campus. We also have graduate students out there. And I also visit the Hillsdale, Michigan campus at least once a semester, and we have really enjoyed our association with the school. I think there are a few things you could learn from how Hillsdale approached things. It has never taken federal funds, and that's just going way back, and has had a strong identity from the beginning, including a certain level of pride that they had the most students who fought in the Civil War who weren't in a military institution, like a military college.
They were also, starting in 1844, I believe they were in integrated college, weren't they?
Yes, which was very rare at the time. And anyway, in recent decades, they put a lot more focus into embracing the role of education as creating good citizens who appreciate the good, the true, and the beautiful, and not about like pushing out a bunch of robots who will get a job. And this identity made it very popular, and it gave it a certain level of prestige. It's now very difficult to get into Hillsdale. It has an acceptance rate below 20%, I think.
It's almost 90% refusal rate at Hillsdale College. That's how hard it is to get in.
Yeah, and this focus on creating people who appreciate the good, the true, and the beautiful, who understand that education is for this purpose, has been great. It has also allowed them a focus, and it would be good to see. What I'm trying to say is also, it is a small school, and they understand that they're very focused on the liberal arts, and I think that is something that the Concordia system could see, that maybe focusing each school on a certain thing that it wants to create, in the same way that you kind of see that Seward has, it draws a lot of people who are interested in going into church music, and here with a wonderful program for classical education and deaconesses, and different schools can have different focuses too.
To be fairly succinct about it, there's a huge marketing opportunity in marketing yourself as a university that is unlike all the other American universities. Just, whatever, the Ivy League universities or the big state universities are doing, don't do that.
Reject the progressive model of education.
I mean, it's becoming pretty well known among parents that the standard college system as we know it is just utterly broken. It's unbelievably ideological. Kids aren't learning things.
They're learning how to hate God, their families, and the United States of America.
And I tell people this, and I have people that refuse to believe me when I say this, but we have 2 kids in high school, and we've had them in private schools in the DC area. Now, granted, most of the people in our circle tend to be more religious and more if nothing else, small c conservative types. And I'm not making this up. I mean, I'm talking connected, well-off parents with academically talented students aren't even considering Ivy Leagues. There were 2 girls, at my daughter's school in their small graduating, it's a Catholic girls' school, in their graduating class of 50 kids this year, that are going to Auburn. And the reason why is because all of those the big southern schools are something of an exception. Places like Auburn and Clemson and things like that are big state universities that are, where you can go and be a Christian and conservative, and you're seen as just another kid. You're not seen as some freak that must be persecuted. And so southern schools are really hot right now for that reason. And then you have places like Hillsdale and, some other, Christian or Catholic schools. Grove City, University of Dallas for Catholic people down in Texas, that are becoming, very competitive, very good schools that are attracting great professors, that are attracting high-level students, and it is all because they are recognized for doing things that the other universities just aren't doing. Or in the case of some of these bigger universities in the South, the SEC schools just didn't get as woke as the other ones because the Southern culture just kind of didn't allow for it.
Just one other thing. I loved this poster, the sign right out here in front of the chapel that says "Stand firm on the gospel" with a young man, just standing very strong. I think leaning into your Lutheran identity is massively important, and young people are looking for people who are firm in their foundations, who aren't wishy-washy on all these things, who aren't trying to appeal to the world, and that can draw a certain caliber of student as well.
And related to that, I think the curriculum has to sort of reinforce that. I mean, Hillsdale might, if you're looking for a basic liberal arts education, it might be the best undergraduate education in the country right now. In fact, I'd probably say it is. They have really wonderful standards, terrific professors. They put a lot of thought into the curriculum, and it's very much in sort of a traditional sort of classical mold. And I would encourage all the Concordias to think about that. They have Hillsdale isn't, they are a religious college without a really strong denominational emphasis, but they have a curriculum that supports their moral outlook. And what I worry is that there isn't enough of a connection in a lot of Lutheran schools and colleges, or the connection could be improved between those two things. There needs to be much more emphasis on classical education and more traditional ways of teaching things, rather than the standard sort of 20th century American Thomas Dewey progressive version of education that is clearly failing across the board. So I would take a hard look at the curriculum, because that also gives you the marketing opportunity too. You can say, hey, we have a classical curriculum, or we do, we have a very traditional version of the liberal arts at this school, and people are looking for that. That is a marketing opportunity in addition to being the right thing to do to support the moral mission of the colleges.
So Mollie, that brings up the question of the Department of Education. And if you just look at the numbers, they're really damning. When it was founded, I believe we were #1 in most of the metrics among developed nations. Our high school graduates were, and now we're something like 27th or 28th, and that's pretty near the bottom of developed nations. And it coincides with the existence of the National Department of Education. Do you think it's a political winner or loser for Donald Trump to effectively shut the place down if he can?
Well, the teachers' unions have gone so fully into working with the Democrat Party that there's no advantage for them. Like, there's no reason to play ball with them because they have put all their cards in the Democrat Party's basket. And the problems with American education are not just because of the creation of the Department of Education, but you're absolutely right. Nothing they did helped, and a lot of what they did hurt. It's a regulatory agency that has issued regulations that are meaningfully harmful for American schools. They have not focused on curriculum in a good way. They have forced some of the radical issues that are plaguing American schools, like the embrace of radical gender ideology. And so, regardless of whether it were a political winner or not, it is a dangerous agency that should be seriously constrained or possibly even shut down, which is the goal. We know some people who are working at the Department of Education now, and they say it's like really their life's dream that they get to work at a place to shut it down in the government now. But it is, even in a sea of not great agencies or departments, the Department of Education has a reputation for not having done good work, for not having a high caliber of federal employee in the headquarters, at least. And so it's interesting to see, but also It's another one of these things where you have heard Republicans claim for decades. I believe it was Reagan in his first term said he was going to shut it down. And it just becomes this thing people say, but they never do anything about it. And to finally have some action toward this, it's obviously facing a great deal of lawfare in response. It's just very nice to see, personally.
It is really, it should make your blood boil what we've done to kids in this country over the last 40-some years. I mean, it's all pure politics. I mean, it's not just that we're 28th in the world in in scores or whatever it is. It is that we're spending $20,000 a year per kid, which, in inflation-adjusted terms is a massive spending increase, and we're getting far, far worse results. It is tremendously political. Like Mollie mentioned this, but I believe the stat is 1 out of every 3 delegates at the Democratic convention is a member of a teachers union. I mean, that's how bad it is. I think the NEA alone gives the Democratic Party $1 billion a year in an election year. I mean, it is just an astounding amount of money. And what has happened in this country is that we have a situation here where we have done, the entire education system exists to improve the teachers' lives, regardless of whether it has any effect on the students. If that means that the teachers don't face any accountability for failing students, so be it. And teachers union officials have, said this like out loud.
I see your point, but I actually think it is far worse than that. I do think they have been trying to inculcate children in a self-hatred, a hatred of the family, a hatred of the country. Everything you see about, what every subsequent generation has worse views on patriotism or an understanding of of the importance of family formation, or you also see it in the decreased rates of family formation, and that is very much a result of what we have taught kids in our schools, mostly government schools.
As a general rule, if you go to any large university, the most ideological department with the worst academically performing students is the education majors. I mean, it's just, that's just the way it is, unfortunately. And the crazy thing is, look, I know there are a lot of great teachers out there doing, really good work in the trenches, but the reality is that, the ideology and the politics behind education in this country are just cancerous. I mean, leveling the education department and salting the earth where it stands is like just the bare minimum we have to do at this point in time. I mean, we really have to start from the ground up in order to fix public education in this country. And maybe we don't fix public education. Maybe we need to put a lot more emphasis on, parochial education and private education.
I do want to say for parochial schools too, that just reminds me of a point, and I say this as the daughter of a woman who received a degree in education and is an amazing educator. Also, though, unfortunately, a member of the even worse teachers union, the American Federation of Teachers. But Christian schools need to really understand deeply that an education degree is not something that they should be seeking in who they hire for their schools. It can, in many cases, be, in fact, a net negative. And so sometimes I hear religious people say, like, oh, well, yeah, we make sure everyone has an education degree. And for the reasons you just said, like, that might not be a barrier, like they might be okay as a teacher, but you definitely should not view that as a thing that you should require for your Lutheran schools or other Christian schools.
Mollie Hemingway is our guest. We're talking about all matters political in our Washington Roundtable, along with Mark Hemingway. When we come back, we're going to spend some time discussing blind spots in the media, covering religious and moral issues. Stay tuned.
Why is it important for today's Christians to know about the early church fathers? The issues, etc. that's the month for July. It is because Jesus taught it, Christianity through the eyes of the church fathers. This new book is written by Grammy-nominated Christian rapper Flame. Learn more about Because Jesus Taught It at issuesetc.org or by calling Concordia Publishing House 1-800-325-3040. The Issues Etc. Book of the Month, Because Jesus Taught It, Christianity Through the Eyes of the Church Father.
Registration is now open for the Lutherans for Life National Conference, September 24th through the 26th at the Great Wolf Lodge in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We have a host of remarkable speakers and gospel-motivated voices for life, including Jim Daly, president of Focus on the Family. Take advantage of early bird pricing through June 30th. For more information, including schedules, speakers, and links to the hotel and local attractions, keep checking lutheransforlife.org/conferences.
Educating a new generation of Lutherans. You're listening to Issues Etc.
Greetings in Christ, and thank you for listening to Issues Etc. If you ever find yourself visiting the Smoky Mountains in East Tennessee, please join us here at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Sevierville. We see it as a small part of our service to the church to provide sound liturgical worship opportunities for vacation and Lutherans to our area. For worship times and directions, please visit our website at splctn.com. That's splctn.com.
Does teaching your child science or Latin intimidate you? Memoria Academy offers homeschool parents affordable online instruction with live online courses for homeschoolers in grades 3 to 12. Memoria Academy master teachers seek to cultivate knowledge and wisdom in their students. And the classical Christian curriculum will give students a deep study of the great books and the liberal arts. To learn more, visit memoriaacademy.com. Memoria Academy, live instruction with master teachers.
Welcome back to Issues Etc. It's our Washington Roundtable with Mark Hemingway of Real Clear Investigations and Mollie Hemingway of The Federalist. We're broadcasting from the Issues Etc. Making the Case Conference at Concordia University, Chicago. Mollie, Michael in Maryland says, what do you think are the biggest blind spots in secular media when it comes to covering religious or moral issues?
All of them. All of the, yeah, it's amazing how much the media do not understand the role religion plays in everyone else's life, not everyone else's, but the media tend to be far less religious than other groups of people. They don't go to church at the same rates that other people do. And so they just don't see how it might affect everything. And they also feel very uncomfortable about talking about it, in part because people get very mad when they say anything incorrect, and there's a lot that you can mess up when you're talking about religion. And so they just don't, they're just scared to talk about it at all. They also don't understand that they're religious. Sorry, I just said they weren't religious, but if you understand what I mean. They have very strong views, and they don't understand the religious nature of those views. We think that there's this secular aspect of the world, and then there's this religious aspect, but there's really no way to avoid being religious. Just some people don't realize that they're religious, and that's definitely where our media are. They have very firmly held doctrinal views on the way the world should be, and they think they're being neutral and not realizing that they're saying things that are very hostile, particularly to Christianity, but to other religions as well.
A former colleague of yours, Terry Mattingly, who's a regular guest on the program, has observed, and I think it's just a good basic observation, that in the legacy media, there's good religion and there's bad religion. And they're altogether happy to cover impartially, so to speak, if that's even possible, good religion, that would be progressive Christianity. But when it comes to what they would term bad religion, that would be conservative Christianity. It's a wholly different approach in the media to that. Have you noticed it as well?
I think it relates to something else you said about how the media see everything through a prism of how it affects things politically, and so they're unable to disassociate from that. They are only able to see, like, oh, these people in this religion vote the way I like, or the people I like are ostensibly affiliated with that religion, so therefore I will treat them nicely. They treat their friends very well, they treat their enemies very, very poorly, but it's a political thing more than a deep understanding of the doctrinal differences.
So there was a big story about a year or so ago with this Politico reporter, and I forget which Republican politician she was upset about, but she went on television. She was like, and this guy is so crazy that he believes our rights come from God. And it was this kind of a crazy thing. And like on one level, like the obvious thing was, well, this journalist is like, you know, so ignorant, she's like totally unfamiliar with our founding documents that say this explicitly. But that wasn't the problem as far as I was concerned. The problem is that she thought that this meant that this Republican politician was a dangerous theocrat for holding not just, for not just believing in our founding documents, but, having some sort of, basic Christian beliefs. And that's the real problem, is you have a situation here where the national media is so isolated and so stratified that they think that basic, ordinary Christian tenets are a threat to them personally. Like, they literally think that they're dangerous to a functioning democracy. And that's a real problem.
Her name was Heidi Przybyla. And it does remind me of this thing, like it's decades ago now, where Justice Scalia was doing an interview with the New York Times, and it was something similar. Like, the reporter he'd said something about Satan being like an actual person, like a figure. And the reporter said, "You can't possibly actually believe Satan is real." And he just laughed, and he's like, "Of course I do." And this disconnect again between everybody that person went to school with at their fancy school and in their newsroom doesn't realize the way the rest of us approach the world.
But it should also be said that while religion might be one of the most fundamental and biggest problems here, this stratification problem applies in so many levels. Go into the Washington Post newsroom and just start asking people questions. Have you ever drank powdered milk? Have you ever set foot in a mobile home? Have you ever fired a gun? Just go down the line, and things that are ordinary for so many Americans, these people have no clue. They have no frame of reference whatsoever. And then, setting foot in whether or not they've set a foot in a church ever is just a cherry on top.
So what is it like, Mollie, to be a Christian in the legacy media? Operating on a daily basis, rubbing shoulders with producers and all the people that are behind the cameras that go into producing news, cable news.
Okay, so first off, at the Federalist, of course, we are very, the vast majority of us are religious. We speak comfortably. We have discussions about theology. We publish pieces all the time from different perspectives, and we enjoy that. So that's my day-to-day work, and I love working in a place with people who are capable of having these types of discussions and who publish on that. And then at where I work elsewhere, like at Fox, a lot of the people behind the camera are in fact religious. So, and some of the people in front too. So it's a little different there. So I don't have that same experience that I used to when I was at, like a Gannett publication, where it might be a little different. But it's been fine. I mean, also, I would say DC in general, whether they are in journalism or not, could use a lot more religion.
So Emily has a question. She says, I was watching the press briefing at the White House when you were there for the Federalist earlier this summer. What was that experience like, and to receive the first question?
So the backstory to this is that the White House has so many people who want to cover it that they started. There's a group called the White House Correspondents Association that's been in place for decades. And it was really to make order out of the mess of people from all the different papers and media outlets that want to cover the president or cover the White House. The problem with the White House Correspondents Association is that over the years it had become this very bad gatekeeping organization that kept any alternative approach to the corporate media approach, that legacy media approach, out, with very few exceptions. And so you ever watch these press conferences and it's always like the same people asking the same questions from the same perspective? It was like that constantly. And during the first Trump administration, it was like a joke. You would just have people standing on their chairs screaming like crazy people. And then you might have noticed that everybody took a nap during the Biden administration, and everyone asked very nice questions about what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, and nobody noticed anything. They're all saying now, oh, we didn't know what everybody else knew about the president's decline. And so the second Trump administration is so fascinating to watch on so many different levels, including that they had this 4-year break to think about how to do things differently. And so one of the things they were like, why are we giving so much authority to this White House Correspondents Association that was literally giving awards to Jake Tapper for creating the Russia collusion hoax stuff? Like, there's no reason to play ball with them. So now they handle it where you can be from a non-legacy media outlet and have access to that room. And so they, as part of that, have a new media seat where people from different outlets, they're not always new. Like I noticed like the Detroit News had the new media seat recently. Sometimes it is relatively new media organizations, but it just means people who are getting an opportunity to access the White House in a non-traditional way. But it was fun, and I wanted to, I'm not a very, like, sometimes I listen to my interviews with prominent people and I'm like, oh, I'm not a good interviewer, or I'm amazed at how I'm able to get information out. But what I wanted to do was ask a question that was not an easy question, but not from the left. So usually when you get hostile questions at the White House, they're all from the left. They're all like, why aren't you more leftist? And I think that leaves a lot of conservatives out. They are sometimes frustrated with issues or the Trump administration, but they're thinking about it from a conservative perspective. And so I asked a question that dealt with like whether they were doing enough to fight the lawfare that was going on, or whether they actually had a plan for fighting the lawfare. And it was fun. Like some of the other reporters there were joking that I didn't get the memo. Sometimes the new media people ask very easy questions along the lines of, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? And they were joking, like, you didn't get the memo that you're supposed to ask an easy question. But I had fun. It was great.
Okay. So in that you raised the former president's mental well-being, Susan in Michigan says, how do we in the U.S. prevent any president from continuing in office while mentally or physically unable to perform? First, your assessment answering what Mollie raised, which was, how do you explain the complete inattention to Biden's decline? And then how do we, aside, I guess, from the 25th Amendment, how do you deal with that?
Inattention is a kind way of putting it. I mean, I think it was a very willful, obdurate turning a blind eye. It really...
Or they were attacking those of us who noticed.
Well, yes, exactly. Remember cheat fakes? I mean, they invented this whole term to say that people pointing out, videos of the, president obviously wandering off confused were not him wandering off confused. That is a really good question. I mean, I think that what needs to happen is there needs to be less political polarization in this country, like so many other things. I mean, if there was even the slightest amount of grassroots pressure, or more grassroots pressure. I mean, I don't think Democrats would have been able to withstand it as long as they had. You might recall there was a Democratic congressman, Dean Phillips, that tried to primary Biden because he started openly saying, look, he's not all there. And Phillips tells all kinds of stories about the, brutal, backroom pressure that was put on him for, coming out and speaking the truth. I do think that the political climate in the Trump era is actually, for better and for worse, more open to saying things that, ordinary people are thinking. I will say that one of the effects of that Biden story was that really did kind of feel like the straw that broke the camel's back following, Russiagate, and did COVID come from a lab? And like there was, about, 20 different stories in the last 20 years where the media was all in on something that turned out to be patently false. And when the media was out there defending Biden and then he went out in that debate and it was clear that he wasn't there, I mean, people just tuned out, the media altogether for like the whole rest of the election, which is why Trump going on Joe Rogan was a, masterstroke, whereas, Kamala was still running the 60 Minutes to try and get her message out. So I think that in a new media environment where there's not this, corporate media hive mind, it's going to be much harder to run that kind of, close ranks around such a blatant falsehood like that. But there's no good answer in terms of mechanism. It really requires courageous, people of, Biden's own party to come out and do the right thing, unfortunately.
Mark Hemingway is our guest, and Mollie Hemingway. We are conducting our Washington Roundtable on this Friday, July the 18th, broadcasting Welcome to the Issues, Etc. Making the Case Conference at Concordia University in Chicago. Stay tuned.
Lutheran Talk.
We have an ecumenical responsibility to hold forth the scriptures and to bear witness to grace alone, faith alone, Christ alone.
Lutheran music. Listen anytime, anywhere with the Lutheran Public Radio mobile app. Download for iPhone, Android, and Kindle at issuesetc.org.
Luther Academy provides additional theological education for our mission partners around the world, specifically pastors who are asking for additional education but do not have the necessary resources in their own church bodies. By donating to Luther Academy today, you will be supplying food, housing, books, professors, and travel for Lutheran pastors who attend our conferences. To learn more about Luther Academy and how you can donate today, visit lutheracademy.com. lutheracademy.com.
I'm Dr. Russell Dawn, President of Concordia University Chicago, reminding you about the Prepared to Serve Church Professional Guarantee. Any new student in one of CUC's 6 church work programs will pay no more than $5,000 in annual tuition and required fees, guaranteed. Prepared to Serve is a donor-funded initiative. Support future church work students by becoming a funding partner at cuchicago.edu/prepared to serve. Concordia University Chicago. With Christ at the center, we stand tall for the church.
If you're in a small parish, you know how difficult it can be to find an organist when your musician is sick, has a family emergency, or simply wants a week off to visit the grandkids. Church Music Solutions can help. Our substitute organist service allows you to select your hymns and liturgy to be sent to an iPad that plays your church's organ. The best way to learn more is to log on to churchmusicsolutions.com and request a free demo kit. There are no obligations and there's no sales pitch. Keep singing with Church Music Solutions.
Essential exercise for the Christian mind. We're listening to Issues, Etc.
You may be one of those pastors who need to be refreshed and refueled because of your parish ministry.
Issues, Etc. regular guest, Dr. Charles Gieshin.
Concordia Theological Seminary has a wonderful program, not only in continuing education during the summer, but in an advanced study program called the Doctor of Ministry. And it's a very practical program because it focuses on congregational ministry. It incorporates biblical theology, the ministry of the congregation. It's also very accessible for pastors, and it's also affordable. You can major in pastoral care leadership, teaching and preaching, and mission and culture. And we pray that pastors will take advantage of this program.
Learn more about the Doctorate of Ministry program at ctsfw.edu or by calling 1-800-481-2155. Concordia Theological Seminary, Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Welcome back to Issues, Etc. Mark and Mollie Hemingway are our guests for Washington Roundtable. I'm Todd Wilkin. Brad in Wisconsin says, and this is for you, Mollie, a retired pastor in our congregation expressed his admiration for Mark and Mollie's ability to speak the truth boldly and clearly to a secular audience that is often hostile to Christians. When I told him that I'll have the opportunity to meet them at the Making the Case conference, he asked if they might have some tips or advice on how to speak to the secular world. Mollie, you first.
Oh, that's nice, first off. I think that being a churchgoer, growing up as a churchgoer, for me helped a lot. And particularly growing up in the Lutheran Church, where we are taught deeply like why we believe what we believe, and we understand that not everyone shares our viewpoints. So you just from a young age, when you're talking with people casually, you understand that not everybody is like you, and you just But you also know why you believe what you believe, and so you just kind of develop it that way. And I've also noticed at the Federalist, we love people who have that kind of background for our writers, because we're trying to reach a general audience, but from a particular perspective. So when you have that combination, it's great. People who understand that not everybody is like them, but understand deeply why they believe what they believe. But I saw Andrew Clavin, I don't know if you were there, there was a dinner I went to where a girl kind of asked a question like this, like, how do I get the courage to say what I need to say on campus? And he said something like, just sit down. Like, if you have to ask, you don't have what it takes. And it was kind of mean, but like with a purpose. It was just like, just be courageous. Like, get over it and be courageous. We just have this life. We're here to share what we know to be true, and you just kind of have to get over yourself. And then you probably have actual helpful advice.
Thanks for the setup there. So to some extent, first of all, thank you to whoever this pastor is that made these nice comments. But to some extent, Mollie and I have designed our life around our identities as people who, say things publicly. And, we are identified as, various things and various vocations, whether we're speaking as a Lutheran in this capacity, whether we're speaking as a, someone with, right-leaning beliefs in this capacity or whatever. But we're sort of very clearly identified as who we are. And I think that helps in a lot of ways. It's hard to cancel me for having, right-leaning opinions when I'm known as being a right-leaning opinion writer, which is, very different than being a, person who works at an elementary school that doesn't want to read the gay BCs to young children, and there might be professional ramifications in that context. So I have a lot of sympathy for, quote-unquote normies who have to deal with, the increasingly political atmosphere in their day-to-day jobs. I mean, that is not necessarily something that Mollie and I experience. But at the same time, it's also true that even for people like us, the pressure in the last 10 years has been absolutely enormous. There have been all kinds of things, whether it was corporate America, whether it was the intelligence apparatus in this country. Like, we have felt this pressure acutely. Like, on January 6th, Big Tech basically turned off all advertising dollars to certain websites, like the one my wife runs. I mean, like, they just flipped a switch because they were, enacting political revenge. And so there's been a lot of things that we've had to do, and to some extent it has been, well, I guess this is just who we are. We're going to go down swinging, go down telling the truth, hopefully.
It makes me think of another thing, too, which is that you really do have to practice these things. And one of the things I love about this conference in particular is that it is geared toward lay people. So often when we're talking about religious liberty issues or religion in the public square, we're always thinking about like pastors, church workers, and congregations. But we don't think about what it's like to actually be people like us who are out there with none of the protections that those entities have, and it's what I love about the program too in general. But so we need to give tips to each other and build up support that way. But like practicing it at a very local level. To me, the most difficult thing in the world is to tell a friend or family member what is true when they are, when they want support for something they're doing that's not right. And if you can practice that and just practice it over and over again, it builds up the courage so that you can do it on a bigger scale too.
I also want to be clear that, there still are enormous pressures out there, and it is very difficult to speak the truth in a lot of circumstances. But because of cancel culture and because of a lot of the, sort of hard left movement on a lot of, sort of free speech issues and other things like that, I just want you all to know there's a lot more resources out there if you're subject to a clear injustice anymore. There's a lot more support out there for you than you might realize. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, there wasn't as much of it, but things are getting better in that regard. And if you're subject to a clear injustice in the workplace because of your opinions or your beliefs and things like that, there are resources out there now, and there's no guarantees with anything, but the situation is a lot better than it used to be, and you should feel a little more confident about that.
Mollie in Virginia and Illinois, for Mollie, the IRS recently made a statement declaring it acceptable for churches to openly support political candidates. In light of Luther's doctrine of two kingdoms, how do you interpret this statement? Should churches back political candidates? What is actually meant by separation of church and state? So to the first question, Do you think this is a good thing for churches? I know that there'll be a lot of Lutheran pastors who think this is a bad thing because they're going to be, quite honestly, pressured by some of their parishioners to make political statements.
Okay, so this is referring to something called the Johnson Rule, I think, that the IRS had, which said that you could not endorse candidates from the pulpit.
This, by the way, did not apply to large black churches that endorse black candidates.
Well, that was
black churches that endorse
I was
Democrats
going to say.
pulpit.
There were one of the big problems with this amendment is that it was unevenly enforced. So a lot of people followed it, even if they would have been inclined to endorse candidates, and then other people just like willfully avoided it and had no repercussions. It is true that the IRS should not have such a rule. It's not the IRS's business what a church does in terms of its approach to politics. That is an inappropriate encroachment of the First Amendment for Americans, which is completely separate from whether churches should be endorsing candidates from the pulpit. And as a Lutheran, we think that the pulpit is for very important things, preaching the gospel, preaching sanctification, and that endorsement of political candidates is like nowhere near the standard of what should be preached from the pulpit. But that's separate from whether the IRS should have had this. So it's good that the IRS is not going to have that rule anymore.
John in Tennessee has a question, Mark. He says, is there any way to remove Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson from the bench? It's like having a high school girl as a justice. She has not been availing herself of, in her minority opinions lately, particularly. She's even, I believe, gotten a little slap down from her fellow liberals on the court.
Yeah, so there is actually a constitutional mechanism for impeaching Supreme Court justice, just like you would impeach a president. Although it does require certain specific criteria be met in terms of offenses that are committed after they've been put on the bench. So it's a fairly high bar. So just technically speaking, yes. Practically speaking, no. And practically speaking, why would you want to? I mean, seriously, like the Justice Sotomayor and KBJ are genuine problems for people on the left that want to advance their particular issues. Like, until they get a majority on the court, they are actively an obstacle to achieving their political ends. Elena Kagan is very much a liberal, but she is also extremely persuasive to other justices at times. She's extremely reasoned and very strategic about how she goes about approaching the issues, and writing about them, even when I don't agree with her. When Justice Sotomayor was nominated for the Supreme Court in 2010, 11, something like that,
Larry
Tribe, there's a famous Harvard law professor, wrote a memo to the president that got leaked that literally said, in short, please, for the love of all that is holy, do not put this woman on the bench because she is not very smart and she's extremely obnoxious and she will alienate other justices. At the same time, Jeffrey Rosen, a well-known legal commentator, wrote a cover story for the New Republic, which at the time was a very influential left-wing publication, saying the same thing. And they still went ahead with it because of pure identity politics. Flash forward to Joe Biden, same thing. Joe Biden literally promised during the campaign, didn't he, that he would nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court because this was seen as like the last, barrier or whatever to, glass ceiling or whatever that needed to be broken on the bench. And so, again, this was a person that was explicitly chosen for certain criteria above others, obviously.
Actually, I kind of disagree with. I know that you're totally right that he said he was going to pick for that reason, and then that's why. But I think the left no longer views the court as anything other than a political mechanism. They would like 9 Ketanji Brown Jacksons on the court. They think that what she's doing is great. She doesn't reason her way. She knows what she wants the outcome to be, and then she just says it, and then she writes these like nonsensical opinions about why she said it. That's very different from the conservative approach. And I do want to just say something. There's been a lot of criticism of the court in the last couple of years, and some of it very reasonable. But it is also true that even including Ketanji and Sonia on there, this is far and away the highest caliber court we have ever had in our country's history. Like, the quality of the justices that are on there now is so much better than it was like during the Eisenhower era, where when people were picking just because, oh, this guy got out of the primary in order to enable me to get the win in the Republican primary, so I'm going to appoint him to the Supreme Court. Like, they were making horrible decisions from people who did not have, they didn't care what their actual jurisprudence was. And you might disagree with individual justices, but again, the quality has never been this high. And it's one of the rare conservative achievements, and people should reflect on that. There have been a lot of good decisions, not just the Dobbs decision, which finally overturned Roe v. Wade a couple of years ago, but all sorts of pullbacks on the administrative state, the unconstitutional administrative state, good decisions on constitutional rights. Like, it's a good court, and people need to balance that with their frustrations.
Sure, that is all very true, but it is also true that the court's legitimacy and the justices' legitimacy in particular are measured by the strength of their opinions. Like, imagine if your congressman had to write a lengthy reasoned essay for every vote he casts. Like, imagine what that would, look like. We'd probably get a higher caliber, of congressmen. But the fact of the matter is that's the way it operates at the Supreme Court. And if you were reading Clarence Thomas and Coney Barrett and Alito's decisions alongside, Ketanji Barrett Jackson's, Brown Jackson, sorry, I'm conflating two justices there. You're seeing a stark difference, and that speaks to the legitimacy of the individual justices, and to some extent the court, even if Mollie's correct that you have, 6.5 of the highest caliber justices you've ever had.
When we come back, we are going to ask both Mark and Mollie Hemingway in our Washington Roundtable to envision a post-Trump Washington, D.C.
The word of the Lord endures forever. We continue in the third book of the Psalter with Psalms 74 through 77. Arise, O God. God will judge with equity. Who can stand before you in the day of my trouble? And I will remember. Join me, Pastor Will Reedon, for the word of the Lord endures forever. Your daily 15-minute verse-by-verse Bible study on demand. Listen at thewordendures.org or your favorite podcast provider.
This July, thousands of youth will gather in New Orleans for the youth gathering under the theme Endure. They will discuss the many challenges faced by the teens of today in all sorts of different areas. To expand on what they'll be learning, the Lutheran Witness June-July issue is on Christian endurance and will be given to every attendee at the gathering. To get your copy, visit cph.org/witness or learn more at our website, witness.lcms.org. Lutheran Witness, helping you interpret the world from a Lutheran perspective.
We're supported by listeners like you. You're listening to Issues Etc.
Psalm 144:1. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Those serving in the armed forces want LCMS chaplains. We need courageous pastors to bring the gospel and sacraments to those protecting our nation, along with wise counsel and the peace found only in Christ Jesus. If you are between the age of 26 and 43 and have a heart for ministry in the armed forces, call 314-996-1337 or email lcmschaps@lcms.org.
Church Interpreter Training Academy has taught religious sign language skills for more than 40 years. Their annual one-week session is July 31st through August 3rd on the campus of Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Learning religious sign language enables deaf people access to the Word of God and to the divine service. Church Interpreter Training Academy is an outreach of the Ephatha Lutheran Mission Society. Learn more at elms/deaf.org. elms/deaf.org.
Welcome back to Issues Etc. I'm Todd Wilken. 10 more minutes in our Washington Roundtable with Mark Hemingway and Mollie Hemingway. So, say or believe or think what you want about Donald Trump. He is many things. He is a showman. He is a force of nature. He is an enfant terrible, as they say in French. And inspires both incredible loyalty and incredible opposition. He has left his mark on American history in more ways than one, for good or for ill. Are we even capable now of envisioning the American politics with no Donald Trump in it? How do you envision, Mollie, a post-Donald Trump Washington, D.C.?
Well, it was kind of like I was talking about Elon and him just being a man of history, and clearly Trump is a unique president that people will be talking about for a long time. This is his last time in office. It's a transformational period. I think what happens next is completely it'll be a result of how the Republican Party handles it. So when he first came on the scene, everybody thought in the Republican Party in DC, despite him winning this election, which was like not supposed to be won, they thought it was a horrible thing. And they thought that they could just wait him out for 4 years and then be done with it and it would be all over. Now I think the Republican Party realizes this is a very real change to their party, that Donald Trump was people sometimes act like he's the one who did the change. I think it's more that he was very responsive to where the mood of the people were, and the Republican Party has a very difficult time accepting that reality. But if they accept this, and I think that it's on the verge of happening, that their party is now a multi-ethnic working class party that is actually responsive to the desires of the American people, they could actually do pretty well in the future. It's a huge if, because aren't they known as being the stupid party? There's like the evil party and the stupid party, and I think the Republicans are the stupid party. The other party is also helping them right now, because I do think the Democrat Party is something of a mess right now. They used to be center-left, and they have been kind of completely taken over by their left flank, with a lot of fighting and a lot of like really extreme demands on them that they're placing on people. Like, you have to accept pretty crazy ideas to make a go of it in the Democrat Party. They could use a Donald Trump type figure to tackle that and to make it a more responsible centrist party like it had been previously. But it's really up to the parties what will happen next.
What are your thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, it's a really difficult question. I mean, I do think that, for instance, like J.D. Vance is a politician of enormous talent who very much understands Trump's appeal, even if he doesn't always embody it in the exact same way. And there are certainly other figures within the Republican Party that understand what Mollie just said, which is really the key thing, which is that Trump was responsive to where voters in the country were, whereas the Republican Party had been this like top-down, leadership thing for a long time that wasn't terribly responsive to what was going on. There's some areas where that is really, really good, like foreign policy. Trump's desire to see, more focus on national interest and less in protracted foreign entanglements, militarily, is very much where the people were, and I think that's a much healthier outlook in foreign policy. And then you have other issues where Trump said, well, the people don't care about entitlement reforms. Not only that, they're afraid the government's going to cut their benefits, so I'm not going to talk about that or make any motion toward it. Never mind that, the problems we have with Medicare and Social Security in terms of, unfunded liabilities are possibly an existential financial problem for this country, and now we don't talk about it anymore. So it's good and bad to be, responsive to the people. Sometimes you need leadership from on high, and sometimes you need to be responsive to the needs of the people. But I do think that the Republican Party gets it, that there's a balancing act between that finally, whereas before they were, exclusively coming from on high, and that is overall an improvement. As for the Democratic Party, yeesh. I mean, I just don't even know what to say. I mean, aside from what Mollie said about them being, completely captured by the hard left, I mean, some of the issues that have them in a box here, like, men playing, in girls' high school sports is like an 80-20 issue in this country. A huge amount of their own base doesn't like this, and yet their own interest groups that they're so dependent upon are so all in on these and other radical ideas that they're siding with the interest groups. It's really crazy and abandoning the people. So I don't honestly know where they're going to go with that. And then the biggest problem the Democratic Party has is they just don't have any actual national level talent that anybody thinks anything of. Gavin Newsom is on track to be, possibly the Democratic presidential candidate. And could you think of a worse governor in the last 100 years? I mean, but he's out there, speaking forcefully, and he's a presence, which is more than you can say for a lot of Democrats. But that's where they're at right now. They just don't have any, emerging political talent, and that's and the average age of Democrats in Congress is, 89. So they got to figure out something.
So 1 minute apiece there's a famous Wilkin 1 minute apiece to respond to the final question. Mollie and then Mark. Can the legacy media be reformed, or are we stuck with this?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I wanted to interject when Mark was talking about the decline of import of the corporate media, how people don't believe them anymore because they were ignoring the Biden decline. It is true that they have never had such low ratings in terms of whether people trust them to report the news fairly or accurately, but they still have way, way, way too much power. Way too much power. They control things like, we were just talking about the example of, you have all these people who are in the Biden administration who have taken the fifth rather than answer questions about the cover-up of Biden's mental decline. And the big corporate media don't want it to be a big story, and so it's not. And so they cannot be reformed. They must absolutely be killed, metaphorically. But everybody needs to work on that to make sure that they don't have any sway.
Mark, about a minute.
Yeah, just to add on what you said, a big problem that Trump is having in a lot of foreign policy issues is that you still have, very much dominant legacy media that holds huge sway in other countries. In the UK, in Canada, is the CBC and other things like that, where these traditional legacy entities are very much a force. So yeah, they're not dead yet, but. Can they be reformed? Absolutely not. But I think the other thing to keep in mind here is that even though I think that neutral, objective journalism is a positive thing to aspire to, and that a lot of journalists should try and do that, if you look historically, particularly in America, what we've seen post-World War II, and this idea of every town having 2 or 3 newspapers and it all being supposedly neutral and objective with the exception of the editorial page, which might lean one way or the other for a political party, is the historic anomaly that we're living through, and it is ending now. Go back to the 19th century, obviously, the yellow journalism wars, other things like that. Abraham Lincoln bought a German language newspaper in Illinois for the specific purpose of swaying votes when he was running for office. I mean, the media used to be much more partisan than it is, and I think we need to get used to going back to something like that now.
Mark Hemingway, senior writer at Real Clear Investigations and books editor for The Federalist. Mark, thank you very much. Mollie Hemingway is editor-in-chief of The Federalist, a Fox News contributor, and co-author of the books Justice on Trial and Rigged. Mollie, thanks to you. Mollie will be signing her books at Concordia Publishing House, the booth over there on the far side, in about 5 minutes. Next week on Issues Etc., we'll talk with Pastor Brian Wolfmiller about conspiracy theories. We'll have Dr. Jordan Cooper answer the question, did Martin Luther remove books from the Bible? And we'll look forward to Sunday morning with Pastor Sean Denzer and Ben Ball. I'm Todd Wilkin. Thanks for listening. Go to church on Sunday. Good night from the 15th Issues Etc. Making the Case Conference at Concordia University, Chicago.
Listen weekday afternoons to Pastor Todd Wilkin and guests on Issues Etc.